This one goes out to the Artcasters. Ooh, Artcasters! I say you're catching your spell, Artcasters. Catching your spell. Ooh, you're gonna cast that spell. Strike a hell. Whoa! Ooh, hi, 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 hi.
That is right. Welcome to Artcasters. This is episode 440, and we have a returning guest. He's a good friend of the show. Before we introduce the guest, we'll make our go-arounds and kind of tell everybody where to find us. So I'm Joshua Kemble. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, get notifications, all that fun stuff. And support indie comics by buying Jacob's Apartment, 2 stories, and support indie music by checking out oh my goodness, Written for the Dead, my latest album. All right, Scott, where can everybody check out your stuff?
You can check out my stuff at the little thing below my name, circworks.com, where you will find the wax packs that I'm doing. I'm doing these custom wax packs based on just prop movies and TV shows and cool stuff that they never made actual wax packs. Meaning, if you're not familiar with what a wax pack is, it's a trading cards packed in the wax wrappers, like they did way back in the day. So I'm doing those. I also have my comic book Young and the Dead up there. Kids vs. Zombie Adventure. Just think Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. And I've got a YouTube channel, which I'm working on some content behind the scenes, a bunch of content, which may be a little bit before it gets up there, but there's still tons and tons of stuff up there, including if you're into creating comics, my series, Making Comics 101, soup to nuts, everything you want to know about making comics. You can check that out on my channel.
I love it. I love it. All right. So, Cory, where can everybody find your work and read about interesting things? Check out the creation of your comic and read a cool, amazing, surreal story about time breaking down.
Yeah. So you can go to corykerr.com. And if you want to hit up the email newsletter where all of that is housed on Substack, you can go to corykerr.com/email. And I am moments away, maybe hours away, from releasing the first 4 or 5 pages of that comic. So you want to get on there because I'll be finishing the coloring tonight. That's my goal. So they're finishing the 4th coloring page tonight. So yeah, check that out. Get on there if you haven't already. There's 2 separate emails, but I don't know. I'm trying to decide how I want to do that. But so far, if you get on one of them, you'll get everything. So I'm going to go with that.
I love it. All right. And then we're joined again by Gerimi Burleigh. So, Gerimi, where can everybody find your work?
You can find my work at jeremy.net. And you can also find me on YouTube at just Gerimi, where I share my creative process, making comics, illustration, figure drawings, and more.
Okay. Am I crazy? I'm hearing like a popping kind
of
a
little bit of a
quiet
static on Gerimi, I think. Could it maybe some static on your earphones? Like, I don't know. What do you think that is, Cory?
The weird thing is that I actually have a new microphone, and it's possible. I tried to duplicate the settings I had on my previous mic. And you know what? Let's just see if anything breaks if I unplug my microphone and plug it back in.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny because we didn't hear it before pre-show. It's only
it sounded great.
Let me hang on. Let me just. All right, are you still getting the crackle?
Yeah.
Huh. That is so strange. I think that the internet is, because this is the other thing. Every time that I'm on here and I'm on my own stream, things work perfectly. But when I'm a guest on someone's stream, StreamYard seems like it just hates me.
It just decides to lose its mind.
Let's see here. I'm just gonna.
The static went away.
Okay.
Can we hear you though?
The static went away, but now
there's no volume. You guys, Jeremy's being attacked by static. Oh no.
All right, I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's the volume. Yeah, you sound great. No, it's nice and clear.
That's all it was. Just a bad connection. That happens sometimes.
Cool.
Unplug, replug. You know, restart. That the simple way, the old ways are the best.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so Gerimi, where can everybody check out your stuff and whatnot before we get into the topic?
You can just go to Gerimi.net. That's my website. It'll have links to my newsletter, which is probably the best way to follow everything I do. It has links to my YouTube channel. It has links to my Amazon store, and all other social medias where I share my work. Links to my Patreon if you want to become a patron and get the inside scoop on a deeper dive into my creative process and just what I share on the YouTubes.
I love it. Cool. So, yeah, and the neat thing about Gerimi is his name is like so uniquely spelled that most of his stuff you can find just by looking up his first name, like Gerimi with a G. So
oddly enough, when I signed up for the website, Gerimi.com was taken.
What?
That's why I'm
What
a
the
.net.
heck?
.com was taken, and I can't remember what it was, but whoever it was that had it, they were like, "Oh yeah, I'll sell it to you for $5,000." I'm like, I'm all right. I'm good.
I always hate that like website extortion thing. That's so early 90s.
Well, I mean, now you can get a .tv, a .comic, a .whatever, and the way I look at it is, it doesn't matter whether you have like one of the top level domains. What matters is how good you are at making stuff that people are interested in looking at.
True.
Because all of a sudden, will people be like, I have the .com. How come no one's coming to my website? Like all of the traffic will go to the person with the most interesting content, no matter what your domain is. So
100%
not worry
true
about that. Just make cool shit.
I love it. That's actually really good advice. Okay, so speaking of making cool
And that's
stuff,
a wrap, everybody. That's the show. Right?
that's it. Take Jeremy's
out.
advice. We'll see you guys exactly. I bet you guys didn't see that coming. We should do in the future like an extra short Artcasters episode. That would be amazing. And
Okay,
hilarious.
all right. Just definitely we're not in the mindset for space for it now, but I think it would be interesting to do an Artcasters where it's like an entire episode that's lightning round.
Oh, okay.
Like you get a topic, and whoever the guest is, I mean, honestly, I think Jim would be great for this because the way he goes. Right, but the idea is that you get a question. Everyone gets 1 minute to discuss that question, and that can include some sort of rebuttal or commentary on the previous person's thing. And then once you go through all four guests, you move to a new question, and you just do that for the whole hour.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Or 90. I don't know. Maybe you do it because it seems like it would get exhausting. But maybe you do it like for as long as you can sustain it. Maybe an hour, maybe 30 minutes, and then at the end, the rest of the episode is just discussing how nuts that was.
I think Joshua Kemble's head would explode.
Yeah, I was going to say that the worst part of that would be if you brought up Fugazi. If people were getting points, I would just instantly lose. And if you brought up AI, like Cory would not be able to contain that in under a minute.
I don't think I've ever had a short AI discussion.
For extra drama, if somebody wanted to set up a timer so it would appear on OBS, you've got the countdown, the video
I love
countdown
it.
for each one. That would really take it to the next level.
So we tried.
Oh, go ahead.
We tried doing that when Josh and I were doing the 48-hour art check. At the very beginning, we had we had like a timer. Neither of us ever hit it.
No,
we never hit it.
No, we'd always like reset it.
I think I can do that.
Mean, another minute won't be a big deal, and then it's like 2 hours later. I still think we should do an art-related debate, I mean just like nerdy art stuff, where it's like, what is better to ink with, like a Crow Quill, a Series 7, or like a Pentel Pocket brush pen, and then it's like go. I think that would be
debate?
fun.
Series 7.
No, we're gonna get into this.
I mean, no, there's no debate. You're welcome to have an opinion, even if it's wrong.
I mean, I'll make the argument for practicality's sake.
I
do prefer a Series 7. I was saying like we could have a debate discussion, about like nerdy art tools.
No, I know. But Gerimi said Series 7, and it sounded like you were not for the Series 7.
I am for the Series 7, but I'll make the argument for the Pentel Pocket brush pen out of convenience, cost, and easier handling and drying time. Because the ink that comes with the Pentel Pocket brush pen is real quick, so you can do more hatch work if you need to.
But I would argue the Kuretake Red Barrel
Mhm.
It's just a significantly better pocket brush.
Could
I would
you
argue
exposit to the audience, Corey, why
I don't
that
have
is?
it with me.
For a lot of the similar reasons that you've got for the Pentel pocket brush, except a higher quality ink that still dries faster, and the bristles, they've got two different types. So that one is actually sable, and then one is a really nice, kind of snappy, longer, finer point than you'd get on the pocket brush, which is kind of like it's just a straight chiseled cone, right? But
Okay.
the Kiritake tapers at the end, and you can get a lot of like detailed small line work like Scotty Young does.
Okay, Jeremy, would you like to rebut that, or should we move on to the next topic?
My rebuttal is much in the way that Corey brought an alternative to the Pentel pocket brush. I own a Sable 7, a few of them, and I've used them, but they're the new Sable 7s. I didn't get the classic actual sable hair ones, which are the good ones.
Yeah.
And the new ones, they do the job. But what I actually prefer to ink with when I'm inking is I actually use the Dick Blick student Wonder White rounds, short handle, so that they fit into like travel cases as opposed to like a long brush.
See, now you're talking to my interest here. Short handle, good.
Yeah.
Good. Now we're talking.
And my thinking is that we as artists tend to be horrible with our tools. We beat them up.
Yes.
So why buy a if I were a professional inker and that's all I did was inking people's work, then yes, I would say get the absolute best of the best and take care of it.
Yeah.
But for most of us savages, I just treat because I think that the Wonder Whites, the price might have gone up, but they're like $2 brushes.
Okay.
And so I'll just buy like a pack of 12. And I treat the brushes the same way that you would just treat like a disposable, like, you know how nibs eventually lose their flex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just treat it like that. At a certain point, it stops keeping its point. Now, I wash my brushes with shampoo because I figure even though it's a synthetic brush, what do you wash hair with? Shampoo. Yeah. And it actually, like, believe it or not, VO5 shampoo with leave-in conditioner is great for washing brushes.
Oh, interesting.
VO5 for washing brushes. I love it.
I inked this piece with just I didn't have I do have a Series 7, but it's split. Mm-hmm. So I just went to Michael's and bought the cheap Cotman student brushes, and they work good. Yeah. I mean, they did the trick. So. Mm-hmm.
So on the brush front too, I'll say Raphaels are pretty rad too. They're a little lower cost than like a Winsor Newton Series 7, but like a little higher up there because they make ones with actual sable, which are pretty good. Mm-hmm. The only problem, I'm with Jeremy and Scott on this. Like, Scott has a Series 7, it's split, so he's using a cheaper brush and it worked fine. Mm-hmm. Part of why I like Pentel Pocket brush pens is I have a really nice Series 7. It was like $100 brush that I got like 10 years ago, and I would just get frozen in fear before using it because I'm like, if I mess up this brush, I'm out $100. And then when I got the pocket brush pens, they're like $10. They have refills. The second you kind of like have that split that happens with the hairs, it's like trash can next one. Like, I love that. I love portability. But I agree with Jeremy. Like, I think at the end of the day, the most pleasant experience I've ever had inking was with a Series 7 because you just can't match that that perfect thick to thin control. Yeah.
And again, like you said, you've got a brush, and like I think you said it was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
The brushes that they've had in the past like 5 years, somewhere along the time after you got it, they changed it. They're not using actual real sable hair, which I feel bad. I feel good for the sables. I'm happy for the sables. I'm pro sable, but the difference in it just it doesn't hold up the way like that's where you get what Scott's saying, where it's like you're using Philip Longoffs and it's splitting now, and that's the thing. I'm fine with a synthetic brush splitting because it wasn't expensive. I treat it just as a disposable tool. It's got a lifespan, and I found for me a brand new brush would usually last me a full 24-page issue of a comic.
Yeah.
Usually around the end is when it really stops holding its tip anymore. And I'm like, well, if I got 24 pages out of a $2 brush,
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things too, because I've had so many friends who've had like nightmare stories with their Series 7s, you know, and this is like the, you know, expensive like Sable ones, you know,
Mhm.
which again, you know, it's sad for the Sables, but you know, there's a lot of like, if people want to get more realistic about it, start looking into what's in your paint colors, you know, like I'm just saying there's a lot of death involved in art
Mhm.
tools. But anyhow, yeah, I had a friend who like the ferrule, like they accidentally just dipped a little too late. And then
Mhm.
when they washed their brush, they had left a little wetness in the ferrule, and then the ferrule broke off. Like, there's so many nightmare stories where you're $100 or whatever.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think there is an argument for both, but okay. So that's a taste, you guys. So if you liked that idea of us having a little back and forth debate, let us know in the chats.
Mhm. I think we would definitely need to be serious on the timer, because even with that, I think we all went over a minute.
Oh
But-
yeah. Well, it's fun. It's fun when you do. It's funny because I think we all get probably burnt out on talking about tools at certain points, but then like once you start the discussion, it's hard to not get geeky.
Well, here's the thing, though. Also, the whole point of this is that we don't get to have the deep dives about all of the process, whether it's tools, creative theory, and composition. We don't get to have those conversations with people in our everyday lives.
Truth.
You know,
Right.
very few of us have a comic buddy that we're actually like in the same, like not in the same house with, where we're
Yeah.
talking to them daily. So anytime you get a chance, it's like, even if you're trying not to,
Oh
you
yeah.
get carried away in the wave. You just get washed away in the art talk. That's the love. That's what Artcasters do. We're casting a net of art love.
That's
Yeah.
true.
And even
casting
like-
it out there, and you guys have washed me into your tide. It's like it's a lovely warm tide pool
I love
of creativity. But here, quick brush thing. You mentioned dipping a brush in the ferrule, or dipping the ferrule in the ink. And for years, I've gone under the idea that getting that wet, dipping it all the way in, is what causes the brushes to start fraying and splitting. But I came across a blog post somewhere in the past few months. I can't remember who to attribute it to,
Okay.
but they had actually mentioned the idea of using the ferrule as an inkwell. The idea of dipping it in far enough that you actually get the ink in it, so that the brush is now holding more ink and feeding your brush
Oh,
as you're
okay.
inking, so you can go longer. And I heard that and I thought, that don't sound right to me.
Mm.
But I was curious if any of you have either tried that, or if you've heard someone else repeat that to you.
No, I mean, I never used the actual well that the ink comes in. I pour it in a little bottle cap or something, because I want, even though it doesn't get as much on it, I don't want to get it past that what's the metal tip thing
That's the
called?
ferrule.
The ferrule.
Yeah.
I don't want to get past that because then it'll start to smudge. It'll get, because I usually hold my brush pretty close to the bottom,
Mhm.
and I don't want to get that on my fingers.
Mm.
So I'm very careful not to get anything above the bristles.
Yeah, and I don't know how, but anytime I traditionally ink too, it's like my fingers are covered in
Yeah.
ink by the end of it,
Oh.
regardless of how clean I am with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and I like half of my illustration, I was wearing this glove when I was doing this, but traditionally, and no problems. And I forgot, I took it off, and just you get just a little bit, on there, and you start getting smudges, and it's like,
So I have a question about the glove. Sorry, I know we have a topic, but this is so
No, this is
interesting.
fun. This is fun.
I love this.
It's a
I feel like this
potpourri
is gold.
episode.
So with the glove thing, I've seen people wear that with like a Wacom, right? And it makes perfect sense to me, because when I
That's what
ink,
it's
I
for.
usually fold a piece of paper and I'll put
Yeah.
it like under my palm anyway, and
Uh-huh.
that seems a little. But what I was curious about is, does it eventually become like a stamp, like a sponge, like where it's like soaking up the ink and then you're like,
I haven't
like-
had that experience.
okay.
I mean, and I don't know why. It seems like it could. I mean, I guess you think if you go over it, I mean, the ink dries pretty quickly, but I don't know. I'm not sure why, but I haven't had that problem. I mean, you think it might, but I haven't had that problem. Because originally I didn't wear it so it wouldn't smudge. I just wore it so I wouldn't get moisture on the page. But I
Okay.
noticed for whatever reason I got way less smudges. So I don't know why that is, but
I love
I
it.
got I got thoughts.
Share
Okay.
the thoughts.
So on the Cintiq, my understanding is for the Cintiq, the people wore it so they wouldn't get smudges on their screen, and that's for drawing with any digital device.
Okay.
I use it because
Hmm?
it's smooth. You know, I mean, my hand will stick. Like if I'm
Mm.
moving across, I'm wearing it now, and my hand
Mm.
would stick when if I'm trying to make a line.
Okay.
My hand will stick to the screen
Mhm.
rather than having to smooth with this on. Is that what you're going to say, Jeremy? Or
Well, no. I was gonna say, well, first drawing digitally and then drawing traditionally. But drawing digitally for me, I never really cared too much about keeping my screen. I didn't have the
Mhm.
problem of my hand dragging, and I didn't care about my screen getting that smudged. But I found when I got an iPad that with the Apple Pencil, it would register my hand on the surface, even if you have it set so that it's not.
Yeah.
You can make it. You can have a setting so it will only react to the pencil if it senses the pencil and it's not supposed to react to your hand. It still kind of does, and your hand will still mess it up a little bit. And so once I switched to the glove, that fixed it. That
Okay.
now with working traditionally, even though I try to be very careful, I don't so much get my hand sweating on the page or moisture, but I would definitely get a thing where I would occasionally smudge the page a little bit.
Oh,
And yeah, I think there is a little bit of oils. So I don't use this glove when I'm inking traditionally, and I actually don't have any of the gloves here because I've been working digital so much over the past few months. But I would get like white cotton gloves that you buy in like a big old pack of like 50 or something. I only needed like 2, but I bought like a package of that, and then I did this where I would just cut the top fingers off and then just leave the 2 fingers and the thumb.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it's just a white cotton glove that's super cheap. They're like 50-cent gloves. And they're the ones that, if you ever see the old videos of animators doing cell painting.
yeah, I was going to say I used to get when I used to order cell paints, they would come with some of those white gloves.
Yeah,
Dude, cell vinyl is hard to get nowadays
I don't
too,
think
and
they
it's
make
such
anymore, do they?
it's such a nice paint.
I've
I
got
know a
some-
couple people
I've
who
got
still
some in my
paint with
garage
it.
unless I threw it out, but it's probably all old and doesn't work. But I didn't have the heart to throw it out.
You have to like really hunt if you're going to use cell vinyl, and I think it costs like 20 times more because barely anybody makes it anymore. Yeah. I did have a friend in grad school. So then again, they may not make it anymore, but in grad school, I had a friend who was doing wood panel paintings with cell vinyl. And it was the coolest, like such like really pretty color, just intense color on cell vinyl. Real quick, what are your thoughts on like adding some spikes on the glove or some glitter or something? So you like when you're doing your stream, you could be like,
What, like Ethan Becker?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a performance thing,
I feel like I would need to have a whole separate glove just for that. Like that's
Nice.
separate. I got the business side and then the showman side. You got
I like
the 2
it.
different gloves.
I like it. I like that a lot. Or you could have the business side and then the one with all the spikes, and that could be like the business side, So you have the 2 where you're like, I mean business now.
Business.
Exactly. Okay, so you brought up a cool topic, and I like it, and I'm curious about it. So, Jeremy, you were talking about, well, you had a couple things you were thinking about wanting to talk about, and obviously this will take us wherever, but you were talking about slowing down to speed up. And I was wondering if you could like kind of kick off that topic in the sense of like what you mean by it. I think I have a gist of it, but I'd love to hear it. So what do you mean by slowing down to speed up, and how has that helped or evolved in your mind, that kind of topic?
Well, there's 2 different things. One is what I'm actually going through, and then there's the 2 is just my overall theory. And the overall theory is probably a more logical starting point.
Okay.
Which is sort of that whole idea of first you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast.
Yeah.
And, just the idea that I feel like speed is a double-edged sword in that it's the thing we're constantly chasing. Like, we want to get the work out faster. We want to produce more. We've got a limited lifespan. You can sleep when you're dead. But at the same time, like, the constant need to perform and produce, in a lot of ways, I feel like it kind of destroys, or at least it damages, the joy of the creative process.
Mm.
And to be fair, when you choose to take something that you enjoy but make it a business, then to a certain point you are opting to sacrifice some of that joy for the overall, hopefully larger benefits of spending more time doing that thing you want to do. But it's one of those things where I don't know if I have a good resolution to it either. But it's spending more time just focusing on whatever those fundamental elements are that will allow you, like, whatever is the thing that you want to do fastest, figuring out how to do it very, very well, understanding it, developing. I don't want to say developing mastery, because to say developing mastery, that takes a lifetime, that takes years and decades. And using, specifically framing it as mastery, is the kind of thing that will keep you from the actual thing that'll help you get better, which is just producing a body of work. You know, produce a body of work, produce more work. And I'd say that the slowing down is just being more thoughtful about the things that I'm making and how I'm making them and how I'm going about them in order to actually get the results that I want. Because I find that as opposed to just working as quickly as possible and just letting the level up happen as it happens, and then versus the idea of doing a deep dive, being a perfectionist, which is where I end up being, and I know that's not particularly the best way to create, but being a perfectionist and trying to make the thing that's perfect, but then producing very little work, what I find seems to serve me best in reality is phases of continually speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, sprinting, and then doing a marathon, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just something that because I'm constantly thinking not just about what I'm making, but I think a lot about how and why I make things. And I think about how I engage with the creative process. Yeah. And I'm trying to find a balance between actually productivity and pleasure. Because if you end up hating the thing you're doing, or you're always stressed out because you're cranking through the artwork, I'm like, well, then it doesn't even make sense. Keep it a hobby and go do something else. You know? So, but in terms of that, so that's one, is just the theory in terms of creative process.
Yeah.
But the thing that I'm actually going through is, you know, I have a comic book that I've been writing kind of in the background for several years now, since I finished my Western, Morning Star. And I'm getting pretty close to nailing down, or at least I was getting pretty close to nailing down the outline. And what happened is, another friend of mine, a pretty experienced comic creator, told me, you know what, you need to get something to just start. And he was saying, why don't you take one of your other random ass ideas that you have and just make a comic of that. Make something that you can just have fun and knock around. And so I said, all right. I had a couple of ideas that are kind of like one-shot comics, and I figure, let me just start that, and I can work on that while I'm finishing writing my quote-unquote magnum opus.
Yeah.
But see, here's the thing. I go and I've got my outline, and it's, you know, it's 24-page comic, like the format I tend to work in. But then I go in and I realize as I start writing the dialogue, all this dialogue sucks. Which, you know, vomit draft first pass, that's normal.
Yeah.
But what happened is that even though the whole point of me doing this is to have something to just be drawing while I'm writing something else.
Yeah.
As I sit down and do that, I look at the ways. It's one thing to do something and just be punk rock about it.
Yeah.
Put out something and do what's in the moment. But if I start making something and I'm like, this isn't good, that's not the same as being free flowing and just getting stuff out there. I don't think I've necessarily found my writing rhythm for writing something that isn't perfect. I can draw a comic and recognize that it's not perfect and still get energy into it and get it where I feel like it was worthwhile to do.
Yeah.
But with the writing, in my mind, it's either awesome or it's crap. I haven't found a middle ground where I'm like, it's serviceable and it'll service the story. And that got me, like, that's where we get into the slowing down. I switched to a project specifically to do quickly. And as I started doing it, I'm like, but I see flaws with it. And if I go forward with it without fixing the flaws, it's one thing to just perform. And like, you know, you're a musician. There's places where you may fumble a chord, you know, you miss a couple of notes. Most times the audience doesn't even notice. But the point is you go, you do the performance, and you just get to the end. It's one thing to be making mistakes and just say, all right, well, that happened. You move on. But if you actually see a mistake before you make it, do you just not fix the mistake because you're trying to go quickly?
Oh man, I love this as a topic because I a couple years back I kind of came to the conclusion that I you know, even with some earlier comic work, I realized pretty quickly, you know, doing comics, like I'm not going to become a millionaire doing comics. Like I'm not going to get rich.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Cory. We got you. We got you back in. It's a broke man's business. But so the point was, like, I did a lot of long and hard thinking. I think a lot of us who do cartooning do this, where it's like, is this worth it? Is this something I should do? And I came to the conclusion that I love comics, so I'm going to make comics. But at that point, that's where I kind of determined that it's not worth making a bad comic.
Mm-hmm.
Like the only reason it's worthwhile for me is if it's a good comic and it's a beautiful thing. Because if I'm not making something beautiful or something powerful, why am I spending my time doing comics? Like I could be doing anything else and get way more fulfillment out of it. The only thing that's going to fulfill me is like leaving something, you know, if I'm going to invest years into this thing, it better be something that I can look back at and be proud of. Because otherwise, like, what's the point, you know? So, so I'm I kind of experience that dichotomy too, because at the same time, you know, like right now I'm working on a page. It's taking me a little longer than it should because I want it to look really good. But am I going to sit here and render it for, you know, a month for one page? No, that's not going to happen on a comic page. So I could, and it would be awesome and like crazy realistic, and but that would be one page. So that's like finding that balance is really hard, and it is an interesting kind of balance between, and it is funny because I've had the same thing because I'm a big project guy. I always end up biting off these giant opuses kind of I think, Gerimi, we might have that in common. It is one of those things where I'll initially, you know, kind of like I'll end up in a Scott scenario. And I'm sure Scott can chime in on this too, but it's like where he made that mini comic and he's like, oh, I'll just make a one-off mini comic. And the next thing you know, like 10 years later, he's still doing he's doing a magnum opus comic, you know, because it's like, it's hard not to expand it out and start going into the, trying to make it great, but finding that balance where you're not like going into a recording studio, hitting record, and then tracking a billion tracks till everything just sounds generic. But also, you know, retaking that track when you screw up on guitar and it's real bad. Like it doesn't sound punk rock. It's just bleh. So yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, what you were saying about like pre-knowing, I think that's why I have trouble doing kind of one-off projects. Cause I feel like, well, why a one-off comic? Like if I'm going to do a one-off, I should do anything else that's going to be, you know, more lucrative or something. Because unless I found like something where that fit the style and the vibe of the work itself, I don't know. Anyhow, that's random thoughts that come to mind from that. What do you guys think about that? Like, have you, you know, like Cory, you're working on a new comic now.
Yep.
What was your kind of thinking in the sense of like time frames to hold yourself? how do you deal with slowing down? Does slowing down actually make you quicker? Yeah.
Unless I have a very specific reason to have a deadline, I just go, and so I try to live a balanced life, but like, I think a page a week, if you're talking like pencil inked, fully colored, is pretty quick. And if I'm hitting that, I'm doing good. Sometimes I'll go a little bit faster than that, but I don't know. So I mean, with this, like, this is the first full color comic that I've done since I learned how to draw 12 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm sure there's going to be some differences. I mean, for one, the colors on this are going to be nuts compared to the first one that I did, because I'm like digitally painting it under the inks. So, but I don't know. I to a certain extent, unless I'm having a motivation problem, I don't like putting that pressure on it, because what I find is I go faster and I push harder if I'm not trying to drive myself. If I'm not trying to be like, oh, I've got to do it, I've got to do this, I've got to get my time in and do my thing or whatever. It's like, I'm naturally going to do that anyway if it's a project that I'm excited about, and so it's like client work where I've got to, like, okay, let's figure out, how many things I've got to do, how many characters I've got to rig, how many assets I've got to create, or how many scenes, how many seconds I've got to animate before, Saturday or whatever, to make sure that I'm still on task. But like my own projects, it's just like just try to keep me away from it, like, is kind of where I've gotten to that. So yeah, I don't know, unless I'm in a slump. And if I'm in a slump, then I switch gears and I write a novel or go do something else, like, so if I hit it's kind of like Scott Lost's Slack method, but with my whole life, instead of like, oh, I don't feel like coloring today. It's like, if I hit a slump that lasts for more than 2 or 3 days, then I'm going to do a sticker stint, and I'm going to make 30 stickers in 30 days, or I'm going to do an animated short, or I'm going to write a book or whatever. And that's been a pretty effective way of doing it for me. So I don't know. I mean, as far as slowing down, I would rather have something good and done than like, than not either of those things. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm even part of this discussion, but
No, I think it makes sense.
You're the tip of the spear, Cory.
I don't know, man. Yeah. I mean, I just came off of a slump, where I struggled for a while. And I think one of the things was, kind of breaking my body in the motorcycle accident, and then the recovery, and then the surgeries, and then hospitals. And then on top of that, like, more client work than I normally take on. So it was a lot of stuff that it was like fun, but I also kind of had to force myself to enjoy it. And so after I finished the most recent music video that I did at the beginning of the year, I just decided I'm done with client work unless somebody throws like ridiculous money at me. And that's been really nice. And I've just I got out of that slump, my body's back, and I'm not draining my creativity in the evenings and weekends on other people's projects.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. Slowing down to me right now feels like I've got this momentum. I'm going to run with it. That worked for 10 years before I, slipped.
Yeah, I get that too. It's interesting too, because and Jeremy, I'm curious what you'll think about this, but like, so right now I'm actually at a point where I'm teaching a bunch of students inking for the first time, like with so we're going to use like Hunt 102s and like get out the cheap brushes and the India ink or ink and like learn how to ink just a little bit, just to explore it. And what I'm trying to encourage these kids, because we're penciling pages, and I keep telling them, like, the more accurate your pencils are, the easier your life is going to be when it gets to ink, right? So it's like, if you want to do a lot of guesswork and you like the idea of the danger of kind of having loose pencils and working it out in ink, that's fine. But your life is going to be easier, especially as you're learning. The more detail, the more kind of time you spend at that process, right? Then your inking is going to be a breeze. And I know in a couple days, I'm going to see some kids who didn't do like tight pencils, and they're going to have a nightmare of a time and be like trying to kind of work out this mess in the ink that would have been easier had they slowed down, right? They would have been able to speed up because the structure is there. So it's that's an interesting thing to me too, just thinking about slowing down to speed up, because I often have found that where if I'm trying to rush myself too much, I actually sometimes do get slower, because I'll do things like skip the detail on the pencils, and then later on it's a nightmare because I'm spending more time fixing it than I would have just taking the time initially.
I want to chime in on that, just like, because what you're talking about as far as tight pencils versus loose pencils, typically in my style, like with Young and the Dead in particular, I pencil very loosely, and a lot of it just happens in the ink. And because of that, it's kind of got an interesting flow and stuff. But for this one, because I'm dealing with like actual like licensed characters and stuff like that, I wanted it to I actually pretty much digitally inked it, and then I used that as the template for going over it and traditionally inking it. So it was super tight, and it took a lot longer. I think it's perfect example of what we're talking about. It took a lot longer, but like you said, it came out exact. There was no guesswork. It was perfectly the way I wanted. And the funny thing is, I look back at the digital version of it, and I'm like, oh, that looks pretty cool. It's pretty tight, and I think I'm going to use that for like a coloring book for like my coloring page for my patrons. Ooh. But when I look at the traditional stuff, I don't know, man. It just looks so much better to me, because it's been so long since I've done a tight piece traditionally. Because I've done sketches and stuff like that, but a really tight piece traditionally, it's like, man, it just looks better.
Well, and like because it's been a while. I think most of you guys have seen Scott ink, but if you haven't had the joy, because I've hung out with Scott when he's not even inking seriously; he's inking for fun. And this man has such a strong control on just thicks and thins of line. Like,
I'll tell you, it took me. I started with the hair on this, and I was kind of getting. It took me a little bit to get back into it,
Yeah.
So it's like, and I think it's kind of like. So to me, the gold standard when I look somebody that a friend of mine that I think does a friend of all of ours that I think just has amazing control of ink is Kevin Cross.
Oh yeah.
And so he's kind of like, I look at him, it's like he's he's
got that Walt Kelly control, like
and it's just like, I don't know if I
but he said recently in his most recent video that he's bored of that and he's moving away
but when Kevin says he's working rough, it's so clean. It's like,
I still found that interesting that he's like, he's like, I've reached the pinnacle of like, digital perfection on paper, but now that's boring and I'm gonna go do something else.
Yeah.
Which I kind of find interesting, because in my comic right now, like the first page I inked was just this precision, and I was like, wow, that is cold, boring stuff. And so I immediately got out the crazy weird brushes and roughed it up and started scribbling, and it looks so much better, and I'm having a lot more fun.
I do
have to get him on the show, because like I'm actually writing a script right now that he's going to be illustrating as one of the stories for me, and I'm just so excited to actually work on it with him, And like in writing the script, I'm trying to create like this hero that I think is going to be up his alley, and just so it's just cool to be able to collaborate like that. So it's been
Yeah,
fun.
I bet we could get him on. I was talking
Yeah.
to him like the other day, so it'd be fun to have him on. Kevin's a good dude. I think that it's funny that you mentioned that, Cory, about like messing it up and stuff, because even while I'm showing my classes inking, like tomorrow, I already have like in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to show him splatter, I'm going to show him drip, I'm going to show him, rough inking, I'm going to show him
razor
clean
blades and the toothbrush and
yeah. I mean,
I'm
because you want to show the gamut. Because the fun thing about traditional is that you can have like a page, and then you can take a toothbrush and dip it in there and just like spray it all over your page. You can go as wild or as clean as you want, you know.
Hey, Josh, are you showing them any like blue pencil samples of like where they would be starting to work? So who are the people that you're? Well, in terms of like.
It's high schoolers, so it's like, yeah.
I mean, but I'm curious. Like, are you showing them any like Klaus Janson or Dick Giordano, like in terms of like finished inks versus like blue lines of different artists to work over?
Yeah. Well, that's not a bad idea. Right now, I'm having them work over their own pencils and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I did show some pencil artists, right, and pencils, and then we're gonna do it kind of that way. But it's not a bad idea. Now I'm kind of thinking about that, but it's not a bad idea to have them test it. It's just, it's an art one class.
When I hear the idea of a high school student inking over their own pencils, the problem is, how do you know whether it's bad pencils or whether it's bad inks?
Yeah.
And even with that, a kid who might have great line control with a pencil just hasn't developed that skill with ink, because it's their first time doing it. So I almost feel like, in terms of just the practice, it almost feels like it makes more sense. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't work over their own pencils, but it almost feels like they should go back and forth between, here's like a sample.
No, that's a great idea, because that's how I think a lot of us learned how to ink, was those sample pages,
Mm-hmm. But like, working over like in Kurt Swan is super, like, hell, inking over some Kirby's. Mm-hmm. Inking over some Kirby stuff or some John Buscema. Some John Buscema pencils would be great to work from, because he's a guy that, a lot of people, trained on. We're inking on some John Buscema or some, a lot of Johns. John Romita Sr.
John Buscema, didn't he do the comic, the Marvel tryout book? Yeah, I've got that.
There we go. Exactly. Because I feel like they can go over that and be like, okay, this is my best effort with the inks over something where I know what it should look like. Yeah. And then when they go back to the pencils, not only do they can now carry over the understanding of, oh, I see what my pencils are lacking now. And
and they'll know the limitations that they're prepping for. Yeah. That's a really good point.
It'll help elevate. Inking over some really established pencils will help them elevate their own pencils while building this fundamental strength. Because I'll tell you, for me, honestly, the way that I learned brush control, which is very separate from just learning how to draw, I honestly learned that from sketching in ink. Yeah. Because that's the thing. I think you have to, at a certain point, you have to learn to not fear the tool.
Yes. So you gotta just lean into it. Honestly, that's a big one with art in general. I think that the older I get, the more I realize, like, because you see younger artists, as you get older. And the one thing that becomes really obvious as you get older and older is like how much fear is like the big enemy of art. Like, it's so hard to do anything well if you're afraid.
Would you say it's the mind killer?
I was gonna see who jumped on that first.
I love it. But yeah, I don't know. I do think it's like a real problem with art. Like, it's just it's like, if you're afraid when you're drawing, it's like you draw bad. Like, I remember my first few times working in house, I was really afraid, and then I did horrible work, and then I finally got over it and started making okay work when I was working in house. But it's intimidating when you're used to like working, with peers or working on your own, and now you're like working with an art director looking over your shoulder. It's like, oh man. but then you get used to that, and then you're able to kind of work in that environment. But it's like, yeah, I don't know, if you're constantly, but then what's funny is fear can, like, a lack of fear could also cause you to have too much speed, and then you're not slowing down enough to speed up. So I don't know, how do you balance that, Jeremy?
Oh, you just give them something that's really hard.
Yeah.
You give them something really hard. It's like, oh, okay, you want to blow through that? Here's a cityscape. Have
Yeah.
at it.
I love it.
Here's a dragon.
Yeah.
Eat this dragon.
Yep.
Every single scale.
Crowd scene.
I mean, the thing is that actually, as it came out of my mouth, it sounds like kind of a dick move. Like
Yeah.
those teachers that would give you those assignments that are tedious just for the sake of tedium.
Yeah.
But I feel like those exercises have a role and they have a purpose. It's not that every artist necessarily needs to do that.
Yeah.
But I think for the artist who is very blasé, and I think for the artist who is unwilling to slow down, because to bring us back to that whole conversation we started with, the thing of speeding up in order to slow down, I think that you need to know when to have spontaneity and when to have patience. Spontaneity and speed has its place, but there's also a time in which you need to say, okay, I'm going to I'll tell you this. This is something very interesting for me. My main thing is I go to figure drawing classes on a weekly basis. And that's probably that's my happy place. That's it's the artistic equivalent of going to like a good yoga session and just
young artists don't realize this. Like, the older you get, the more you do art, dude. Figure drawing is a vacation. It's so fun. It's like, yeah.
You know what? It's like a good camping trip, because on a camping trip, you might go hiking way out into the woods. You might be hot and sweaty, and there's bugs, and your muscles are sore and achy. But when you bite into that beef jerky or the sausages, you grilled over an open fire, and then you dive into a cold lake that's right next to you, and it's refreshing. Figure drawing is all of that. It is a mental and in some cases physical workout that can leave you just drained at the end. But you're like, oh, I feel so good.
Yeah.
But this was the thing that ties directly into the whole slowing down is there's times when I would be sitting there and it's like, I'll make a mark and I'm trying to get a lot of energy in it and get it exactly what I want. I'll make a mark and I'm like, oh, that's wrong. Erase it. Like, I'm spoiled by digital. It's like I make a mark, it doesn't look good, erase it. I may make it 3 or 4 times, eventually shape it into it, or maybe try to draw something that's kind of close to it. But what I found sometimes is that I made a conscious choice, as opposed to making a swipe and either getting it or not getting it, and then trying again, but they're all swipes. I actually found, back to the Dune references, I specifically, a voice in my head said, the slow blade penetrates the shield.
Nice.
And what I would do is I would put my pencil down where my line was starting.
Yeah.
And I would look at where I wanted it to end. And by intentionally saying, I'm going to make a light but slow measured mark, like you're drawing, almost like your drawing is Tai Chi.
Yep.
And the thing I realized is that I can correct a line as I'm making it.
Yes.
And normally it's like I aim and I strike. That's how I ink. That's how I draw. That's how I do my gestures. And I started realizing, oh, wait, I don't have to do that. And part of that is drawing long enough that I've developed a somewhat steady hand. Because the hand of I think most young artists are very erratic hands.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to say, oh, I'm going to make a slow motion, and as I'm making it, I can decide, do I want to make this arc wider?
Yeah.
Do I want to make it narrower? And literally to simply halfway through a line say, and now I'm going to make this thinner. Or now I'm going to go thin to thick. And it never occurred to me to make the changes. You have to be able to think fast enough to make these decisions while you're making the mark. But if you slow your hand down enough and you've developed enough control, you can be modifying your stroke mid-stroke. Yeah. And that was a game changer for me. And this is a discovery that I had this year. This is a discovery I had a few months ago. This isn't something where it's like, oh yeah, at a certain point in my life. I'm like, this is stuff I'm discovering now.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you on that, Jeremy. Do you find that you're paying attention to your breath as you're doing that more? Because I've noticed as I'm doing what you're talking about, if I don't pay attention to my breath, I like forget to breathe. Because it's kind of like this is a terrible example, but when I was learning to shoot a gun, you know, like you don't hold your breath.
Oh no.
Because then everything starts to, you know, whatever. But like as I'm doing some of those lines, if I'm not paying attention to it, I'll like hold my breath and then I have no air and the line starts to get shaky or I start to speed up or those types of things. I'm kind of curious as you're kind of coming to this realization. Do you have breath control and what is it? Because what I have been doing is getting ready for it. So I'll ghost that line a couple times to get that movement in my shoulder and my elbow. And then I'll exhale when I'm putting it down.
I don't have breath control when I draw. I don't usually think about breathing while I'm drawing. But that said, everything that you just said is exactly what I would do because, for instance, when I do, like, there's some isometric exercises that I do for my core strengthening. And, for instance, like just doing a plank. When I do a plank, instead of saying I'm going to do a plank for 30 seconds, I switched. And when I do isometric exercises, my breathing count tends to be a 4 count in and a 4 count out. I do it regularly enough that I know. And I also know, like, if I intentionally, for a reason, want to do a 5 count, I know the difference between doing a 4 count breath and a 5 count breath. And so now, instead of counting to 30, I will just say, I'm just going to hold this pose for 4 breaths. And I know that it'll be 32 instead of 30, but I'm like, that's fine. It's a little bit over.
Okay.
So that said, when you were describing it, Corey, I was already thinking to myself, well, I don't do it, but I'm going to start paying attention. And when I know exactly that it would be prepare to make the stroke, take a deep breath, and then the exhale is the drawing. And because there's some exercises I do where my exhale is a 4 count, there's some where it's an 8 count. That means if I'm making a very long line, I will know I'm not going to run out of air. Just like for me, I'll be 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. I've already gone across a whole 11 by 17 Bristol board. I can go to 8 easily. So me just constantly starting a stroke and like inhale, deep stroke, and I know that exhale will last me as long as I need it to get through that line, even if it's something where I'm making a long sweeping line and coming back around. I mean, for me, now that I think of it, I almost feel like drawing a circle in ink would be a good exercise for a breathing count.
I honestly think that probably, like, as much as I would hate that exercise, that wouldn't be bad. Because I bet if you just did that daily, like just daily, even if it's just one you're doing daily where you're just trying to do a perfect circle in a swoop, I guarantee your brush control or if you're using brush or quill or whatever it is going to get better through that process.
Do you guys ever look at Peter Hahn, the illustrator? He's an art educator, but I think he's like a guy who taught at Brainstorm in LA.
Okay.
But anyway, one of the exercises he has is one of those. I'm sure you've seen people that have the exercise where you'll have a whole sheet full of different sizes of circles. Yeah. And you'll have the whole sheet of wavy lines and the whole sheet of straight lines and the whole sheet of like textured patterns. And the thing about it is when you look at somebody else's sketchbook and someone doing that, when you see what the average person looks like, you're like, okay, they're going through the steps. When you see someone who does it and they're not perfect, but you can tell that they're actually really, really good. Yeah. And you can see pages of it. It's like it kind of takes your breath away. Yeah. Like in the way that somebody who doesn't do yoga, but they've done it before, so they know how hard it is, but they don't do it. When you look at that, you're like, oh, this person. Yeah. They've gotten to their Zen place.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny that you bring up yoga too, because before I don't do yoga very often anymore, but I had a whole year where I was doing it as an exercise, and it was hard as heck. And it's like, at first I thought, oh, this will just be like a stretching exercise. And then you do it and you realize like how much core strength is involved in like serious yoga, you know, it's like, it will kill you. Like it's going to burn you, dude. So then when you see people even do it semi-competently, you know, once you're kind of in it, it is really impressive because it's like, and especially when like sometimes like before getting into it, I'd be like, I see old ladies do this, whatever. And now I'm like, wow, those old ladies are
This is
on point.
birds.
Like,
they will mess you up.
yeah, like I would not mess with that old lady. But yeah, it's that's an interesting analogy. What's fun to me about life drawing too is I think life drawing is a really good practice in learning flow states. So it's interesting that there is like a thing about breathing. I've never really paid attention to that, but I have noticed that if I get in the zone, it's like those early exercises you do early in art school that I used to hate, where it'd be like blind contour or contour drawing. I used to hate that so much. And now that's how I life draw. Like that's most of my life drawings are like a singular line. I love doing life drawing in ink. I keep the line. I don't really lift my pen a lot. I don't do a lot of erasing. And I end up with these really accurate like life drawings. And a lot of it is getting in that flow state and just letting that line like walk across the figure you're looking at. So it's super fun and relaxing and accurate and has gesture and movement, but you can tighten it up too. And it's like, it's funny how like a lot of those basic things, you know, that you have to do in art school that kind of suck, suddenly they become like this really enjoyable thing. Because to me, that's one of the most enjoyable things is like to just sit down. I love quick life drawings too. I used to hate that when I was younger. You know, I'd be like, the 20 minutes is not enough. And now I'm like, all right, we had the pose for 5 minutes. Let's go on. Let's go. Like 5's a long time. Come on. We do 2,
Okay.
you know?
That is the most fascinating thing right there.
Yeah.
Because I am experiencing the inverse.
The opposite,
reaction.
yeah.
Because for most of the time that I've studied figure drawing in my life, it's been classes where were like 2-minute to 5-minute poses, sometimes 8-minute poses.
Yeah.
Occasionally, some classes where there was long, there'd be like 10 and 15-minute poses. But that's been like for years, that's been what I'm studying. The place where I'm going now is like, we'll do like 2s and 5s to warm up and then 10s. But then after that, the whole rest of the it's a 3-hour class, and the other 2.5 hours are all just 20-minute poses.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And it is so interesting now to be able to sit there and refine pieces in ways that I wasn't able to refine them in class.
Yeah.
And if I do get skittish, or I'm like, oh, I want to do quick stuff, then there's enough wrong with any given drawing that I can just halfway through a 20-minute pose say, you know what, I'm just going to try this again.
Yeah.
Or I can sit there and take the pose I did do and just do breakdowns of different elements that aren't working, or just pick an area that does work and say, you know what, I'm just going to practice shading, and I'm just going to shade this one part. I can do all of that.
Yeah.
But the idea now of doing drawings that have a lot more finish to them than I've ever really brought. It is again, it's slowing down to speed up.
Yeah.
Because
I understand that too.
Now.
Yeah. It's funny because for me, it was the opposite where I got really good at like slow poses. 'Cause I had this weird, crazy genius teacher at Cal State Long Beach. If you guys go to Cal State Long Beach, take Yuji. He's still teaching there. He's going to retire soon. Take him. He's a genius. But life painting teacher. And we would do, wet on wet oil paints, like from a live model. And it was amazing. It was like one of the best classes I've ever had. But those were like long poses. And so you'd be doing like to the meticulous kind of life drawing where you're measuring like the turn of the head and then measuring like the distance and kind of using like the geometry of the skull and stuff to kind of like try to perfectly, recreate this pose.
You've got like the little grid thing in front of you in class. Everyone's got the little L thing that you fold out to do the measurements. I
guess it's more just like kind of learning the math of like how a head works and being able to kind of analyze like, okay, if like the head is turned this way, then this needs to be this much shorter than the other side, and being able to kind of accurately get it was wild. But the funny thing is it took me that to be able to unlock life drawing, because for years before that, I didn't understand it. I kind of enjoyed it, but I never really got it. And then when people would do quick gestures, I'd just feel like out of my depth. And it was after that class where I was able to like really quickly knock out life drawings. But up until then, it was miserable to me if I had like a costume figure class or something where it's like quick poses. I was like, I don't understand why I don't get this, And I would be the kid who's like, why are they moving? Like, have them say. So it is interesting because it does sound like we have like polar opposite experiences with that. But I will say, dude, if I could draw like a 20-minute life drawing today, I'd be down. If I can draw, at a mall, a crowd of people walking by, I'm down. Like, drawing from life is fun, man. I don't know. Wait, how do you guys feel about, like, Scott, when was the last time you did life drawing?
Oh man, it's been a while, but I did enjoy it. I think it might have even been pre-COVID.
Nice.
I used to go once a month. They would have a life drawing, drink and draw type thing. And I would go. I was clothed models, but because it was in a bar and stuff. But
yeah,
but it was still, it was great practice. But I just stopped that during COVID, and I'm sure it's back up again. I got to go check, but I'm sure, or there's something somewhere else. But yeah, I used to really enjoy it.
Up. Yeah, it's been a long time too here. It's just so fun.
I mean, I'll tell you guys, one of the things, because I'm kind of a little bit of a art learning junkie, because I've got a schoolism subscription, and I'm always kind of dipping in and out of those classes, in addition to taking, the figure drawing workshop that I go to, in addition to going through art books that I've had sitting on my shelves for years and never opened and saying I'm going to take them down and open them. But one of the things in a class I started taking on portraits was that you're supposed to do 2 portraits from life a week. Well, they can be self-portraits or not. But I always felt bad that my wife is a fan of art. She's not an artist, but she's very much supportive of my creative practice, and she's creative in her own ways. And so what I started doing, and I haven't stuck with it, but there's definitely been days where I tried to sit down and draw a portrait from her. Like, for a while I was doing it once a day. And it fell off a little bit, and now it's like, maybe once a week I'll sit down with her, but I want to get back to that. And to be honest, that's one of those things where I feel like it's kind of nice to be able to do that for a spouse or partner or whoever, because we spend so much time in our art brains. Yeah. And they have to live with that. Yeah. They have to live with the fact that part of us is always going to be gone. And I like the idea of like being able to focus my art attention on her. Like for that moment, she feels the eye of Sauron upon her, but it's a loving eye. And she's like, so while you're drawing, are you just like just whispering? That's just pillow talk, baby. That's how we get the evening started. But well, I was just thinking Sauron. I can't remember how he communicates, but I do think it's like weird kind of Sauron-y whispers. Yeah. But I just the fact that for so much of my life, art has been something that separates me from other people. Yeah. It brings me extremely close to fellow creatives. But for people who are non-creative, it's a barrier, and it's a barrier of choice, because I know I could say, all right, I'm going to take my head out of my ass and I'm just going to connect and be here with people, and that's good and that's healthy. Yeah. But I also know that if I spend too much time doing that, then I'm just not happy. It's like it's almost like I'm performing. I'm being a normal person to make other people happy. And at a certain point, I get cranky. I'm just like, I'm not going to do it anymore. Yeah. But to be able to take the person that's closest to me and say, here, sit. Here's the TV or whatever you want to read or do. Just keep your head looking that way, and I'm going to pay attention to you. Just paying attention to you. But I'm paying attention to you through the vehicle of it's kind of like it gives her a chance to connect to that thing that I connect to. I love that. She may not feel that Zen feeling of the art, but she feels that I'm literally, she can sense that I'm doing the thing that I was put on the earth to do. That's awesome. I wonder if I don't think that would work with an artist, because I'm married to an artist. So if I do that, she's just going to be like, dude, I need to draw. Like, I have 5 books due. Like, it's just, we're going to be like, but yeah, I love that idea.
That is the downside of like though when you're with another artist, like you're rarely gonna get somebody looking at your work and be like, "That's incredible." It's like, "That's great." What's with that arm? Like the elbow's a little off, and you're like, "Oh man."
Yeah, like, and they can see it, and they can call you on your BS.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing though. I don't know if she actually has a craving for or enjoys life drawing.
Yeah.
The beauty is that then you can do that for each other.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Yeah.
I in fact, I'm going to be posing for the portrait class for the place where I take figure drawing. They separate from the figure drawing class, they have just a portrait class. So I'm going to sit for two nights, not in a row, but like 1 week and then the following week the same night. I'm going to sit for them because the guy who organizes it just asked, and I'm just like, yeah, sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we'll see how that goes, because having sat for portraits before, it's challenging. It takes a certain level of mental fortitude. Unless it's the kind of thing where you can put headphones in and just listen to a podcast while you're doing it, which in this case, I don't think would be appreciated. So just being able to keep still and mentally relaxed is a challenge unto itself.
Dude, a lot of people have Oh, go ahead.
The amount of energy that it takes to not move is crazy. So when I was a freshman in my undergraduate, I survived for a couple semesters as an art model. Oh man, it's rough. You're like sore after.
Oh yeah.
Cause it's like, let's hold this for like 35 minutes. Like I did sculpture classes. Oh, and everybody's getting up and moving and, and coming up and measuring things and whatever. And you're just like, it's like, holy crap. And you can't move. It's super hard.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's nuts. Those life drawing models that'll do like a 2-hour pose with like maybe one, 2-minute break or something. I don't understand how, and sometimes they'll hold like a crazy pose and you're like, I would be dead. Although I do notice that a lot of those models will do yoga. So it's like they do stuff that's like strength training because
dancers. Yeah.
That's hard, man.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because modeling itself is like a form of yoga, because no matter what, it's resistant training. Because when you think about it, no matter what position, whether it's having your arms at your side, whether it's having your arms straight up, it's up there, whatever the position your body is in,
it's going to suck after.
Yeah. Some of your muscles are contracting to hold in the position. Some of them are relaxing. So no matter what it is, your body's even if you hold it in a neutral position, what that means is that muscle is still half contracted. So no matter what, you're by not moving, you're harming your body, which is something that my wife and I talk about, because both of us roll around in our sleep a lot. And we manage to not really disturb each other. Our bed's big enough that we're not whacking each other all night. But like, she is more of she'll roll and she'll flop and she gets frustrated. Whereas I have like my little space. I ball up around the pillow, and then what I do is I rotate like a pig on a spit. I just sort of rotate around that pillow. At certain points, I'm sleeping face down, which. Now I sleep with the CPAP machine, so that's challenging. I gotta make sure I don't. The cord doesn't wrap around my neck.
I'm right there with you. We're in the club, Jeremy.
You guys have your CPAP C pass. You get it backstage in the cool club.
This immediately became some super old man talk.
It totally did.
It was always super old man talk.
It was a little bit more.
You see, not all people that have CPAPs are like overweight.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm total. I might be a tiny bit overweight right now, but.
No, you guys are both in better shape.
It doesn't help.
Yeah, I was going to say you guys are both in pretty good shape. So
depending on just your septum or sinuses or whether you have allergies, there's all different types of factors.
And if you live in LA, like I'd say about 9 out of 10 people have a deviated septum for some reason.
Who knows why? Started in the 80s.
I am like absolutely love this topic. I think that the advantage of slowing down too, because like here's the thing, like quick drawing is really good for exercise and for being able to very quickly analyze like shapes and form and movement. and maybe even like start thinking about mechanics of movement and weight distribution. But slowing down, I think, especially when it comes to life drawing, is really where the rubber meets the road, where it's like you now you have time. So what can you make in this time? And if you run out, like if you're not making something that's accurate, you got work to do, you know? And it's like, I think that's an interesting thing about slowing down as well. But it's hard to know. So Gerimi, you haven't found like a perfect balance, like with your own personal work, like comics. How do you balance that? You know, like for me, it's like, I don't want to spend a month on a page, but I also don't want to rush a page where it's like, I'm not happy with the results. So it's like this weird fine balance, and I don't quite have it down perfect. I don't know. Have you found that balance?
Well, I did have that balance while I was working on Morningstar. I'll tell you what it is I find that I keep repeating the same cycles over with different tools and different media.
Got it.
Because I've spent so much of my life learning how to draw, like just drawing the figure. And then when I started learning to work in ink and learning comic book storytelling, I was applying the same process. And now when I'm writing, I'm applying the same process, which is starting with everything looking like garbage. And there's less resistance to finishing because no matter how hard you try, it's not going to look that much better.
Yeah.
Your best effort and your worst effort, there's not that much difference. And then as you work on something, and again, it could be a bunch of small projects, which I actually advocate. I'm the worst because I don't practice what I preach. I advocate short stories and small projects and do a ton of them, and then maybe someday do a novel.
I advocate do what Jeremy's doing and go crazy, go ham, make your crazy opus.
My very first project, to be fair, I have done a bunch of small short stories and comics for indie publishers over the years. But when it came to self-publishing, my very first project was a 144-page self-contained graphic novel. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe the next one can be a short story. All right, well, maybe the next one can be a 4-issue miniseries. And then it ended up being an 8-issue series. So it was twice as long as the first one. Now the new one I'm writing, already it's starting out as 8. But it's 8 where the final chapter is an open-ended world such that I can jump around and tell more stories in the world at any given time. It's like, I love that. It takes place over the story of like a girl's childhood to like teenage years, and kind of a mother-daughter story. And by the time you get to the end of it, it's one of those things where I can go. There's all sorts of space to tell interesting stories at different points in the girl's age.
Okay.
So, point being is that the writing right now is the thing where the difference between my best efforts and my worst efforts, I can now tell the difference. When I write something that's crap, the one is I've written enough stuff now that because I see the difference, it goes back to that thing of, not wanting to rush a page, but also not being satisfied by it. And I think what it is that I have learned to accept that I'm not a genius.
Yeah.
My ego, as much as my ego tells me, dude, go for it, get an Eisner, you're gonna make it. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Just make something that you're not going to be embarrassed by. But what that does now is when I do my first pass and I'm dissatisfied with it, I'm like, okay, you can do better. Okay, you can do better. And honestly, freelance work and doing work in a day job where I've seen enough projects where people ask me to make changes and I don't even question them. I don't fight them, and I'm just like, you want it different? I'll make it different. You want this profile blue? Make the profile blue. You want it bigger? You want it smaller? You want extra stroke on the logo? I don't care. Yeah, sure. I'll do it. Okay.
You want to rotate the figure? Cool. Hope as long as I'm getting hourly, we're good.
Yeah, I know the tools well enough that the thing that they add, it's rare that someone asks me to make a change that's like, oh, this is going to take me 2 weeks.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
Stuff I'm like, all right, I know some tricks. I can do
little
this.
things. Yeah,
quickly. But what it does is it's that idea of it's not better, it's just different.
Yep.
And that is the tool with which I judge change.
Mm.
When I look at something, I say, is this going to be better or is this going to be different?
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, I'm asking myself, like, when I sit down to draw something, if I'm dissatisfied with it, honestly, more often than not, what it is unless I look at something and I say, okay, I know I can do better.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the answer is yes to that, then I'm like, 9 times out of 10, that whatever my instinctual reaction is, it's probably, you know what, leave it alone.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. Sometimes I'll look at something and I'll just be like, no, that's objectively bad and I have to fix it.
Yeah.
and here's the other thing. In the same way that, like, Stephen King will say, finish a novel and put it in a drawer for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
It says 6 months is even better, so you can look at it with fresh eyes. Something I started doing during Morningstar, and I don't know how to do the equivalent of this with writing, but I'll probably figure it out, is with Morningstar, my rule was no changes until I finish the issue.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay.
If it's
Yeah.
a 24-page comic, draw all 24 pages.
Mm-hmm.
That way, by the time I get to the end, I'm at least going back. The fact of the matter is, generally speaking, if I can finish an issue in 3 months around a day job, that's doing well. More often than not, it tended to be about 4 or 5 months per issue.
Yeah.
So you definitely have time. But, I mean, the inking stage, for the most part, 24 pages, just working a couple hours a night, yeah, I could usually finish inking an issue in less than 2 months.
Yeah.
So that's pretty reasonable for it not being a full-time gig. But in 2 months' time, that gives you enough reflection to go back and look at it with fresh eyes now and say, okay, now I'm going to go back and re-ink this face, white this out, adjust this particular page. And I have had pages where I'm like, okay, now I've had time to reflect, and this whole page is objectively wrong and broken. I need to redo it.
Mm-hmm.
That does happen.
Yep.
But giving myself that time to reflect on it and look has been invaluable. That's a great tool. You know, the best tool of all is time. Time. I can't remember who said it. This is this is definitely a true writing quote, and I can't remember. But time is the best editor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Someone said that, and I absolutely agree. Because you can just come back and look at stuff, and there's stuff I've looked at, and at the day after finishing it, I absolutely wanted to change it. And then 2 weeks later, I look at it, I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
No, totally.
Speaking of time, I just want to draw the attention to the clock for Josh.
Oh, yeah. I actually think we will probably be wrapping it up, but I think that's a great place to leave it on. And I think the idea of time's a great one too. Like I remember as a young artist, one of the first things that helped unlock the doors to being able to make it as a commercial artist was looking at artists I admired, looking at my own artwork, and then starting to analyze, like, how long did it take them to do that? And then realizing, oh, they spent 24 hours on that. I spent 2 hours on my thing. Why would I expect mine to look anything like theirs? I need to triple the time they're spending to get that result, right? So I love that time. That's a good point. Anything time-wise is huge. So, all right, we got Gerimi. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate that. It's really been a fun conversation. Is there anything we didn't touch on that we can get to in the next few minutes? Anything we didn't get to?
No, I mean, I feel like any new topic we start will be an epic. There's no short topics with us.
Yeah, I know. I love hanging out with you guys. So,
yeah, I mean, you're welcome back anytime, Gerimi.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, we'll have to have you back on soon because it's always fun just chatting and hanging out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me. It's always fun to just hang out and chop it up. And I mean, I love free-flowing art conversations where stuff go. I'm hard to keep on topic. I will come back to a topic and retouch it, but I love to wander off the path. So it's always a great time with you guys. So thank you for having me.
I love it. Cool. Well, thanks. So where can everybody, one last time, where can everybody find your work? Where can they get Morningstar? They should get your, existing books as well. So where can they get your books and support
You
your
can
stuff?
go to Gerimi.net, and that's GERIMI.net. And from there will be links to all my social media, the different platforms we can purchase my work. There's an online store to buy direct. I almost encourage people to buy from other platforms because then that means I don't have to pack up anything, and they can just have you can have stuff be fulfilled there. But you can find ways to reach me, to follow me on Instagram. My newsletter is something that, and it's funny, Cory had mentioned about having 2 different lists because I've been following people on Substack for a while, but I recently started a Substack, and I have not moved my existing mailing list over there. I've just basically just post the same newsletter twice, and I just want to see how it does. And then if it's something where I'm like, oh no, okay, this is worth talking about, then I'll port people over. Otherwise, I've been looking at some other possible platforms for moving my newsletter to. But like I said, I send out a monthly newsletter, and it's sharing more of my musings on the process, links to the videos, a couple of videos I post a month, all that.
Awesome. Cory, where can everybody find your stuff?
Yeah, jump onto Substack as well. You can go to corykerr.com/email if you want to see all of it. corykerr.com/book if you want to read the novel. And this won't work just yet, but if you go to corykerr.com/tag, TAG, if you're watching this tomorrow, then that'll take you to the new comic. So.
Awesome. Shout out to Sean Tiffany. He sent me a bunch of his amazing postcards. You guys should support him on Patreon. He's an amazing artist. He sends monthly postcard to Patreons. Beautiful artwork. Jacob's Apartment. Pick that up. Pick up 2 stories. Support indie comics. Support my indie music. Joshua Kemble. Oh my goodness. Written for the Dead, my latest album. Sorry, I've released like 4 albums this year. So, okay, but check out my stuff under that name. But after you check out Jeremy's, and definitely, I mean, you guys should check out what Gerimi does because it's pretty impressive, and he will dedicate himself to something until it's finished. He's one of the people in the graphic novel club, which I think is great. Scott. Where can everybody find your work and catch cool videos, nostalgia, all sorts of stuff like that?
Yeah, so you can find my stuff on my website at circworks.com, where you'll find my comic book Young and the Dead. I've got a shop where I have digital products. I like tools for making comics. I've got all kinds of real cool tools to help you make comics better, faster, more efficiently. I also have like some physical products, prints, wax packs, all that kind of stuff. On my YouTube channel, I'm currently making videos where I take ephemera from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I put a unique spin on it. Real fun videos. If you haven't checked those out, check them out. Or you can go deeper into my catalog and find all my how to make comics content. So all that stuff. And then this show, the Artcasters, we do this show pretty much every single week, except last week was Halloween, so we took the night off. But pretty much every single week. But just to let you know where we're going to be, because it does rotate between the 3 of the host channels, Josh, Cory, and myself, it can get a little confusing. And also, since daylight savings time switched over, you'll notice we're trying to be quick to wrap up because I've got something I got to take care of. Mm-hmm. But in order to have a little extra time so we're not so crunched, we are going to be moving it back 1 hour, I think, and assuming you guys are okay with that. So, so we're not so rushed towards the end. It's just we didn't get a chance to organize that today. So, but all that kind of stuff, you'll know if you join the mailing list. There's a link in the description of this video. Click on that link, and we don't spam or anything. All we do is usually at least 30 minutes before we go live, we'll send out an invite, and you'll know exactly whose channel it's going to be on, what time, all that kind of stuff. So do that.
I love it. We did it, Scott. We kept it under an hour 30. We're going to get you where you need to go on time.
All right.
Thanks to everybody who joined us. We'll see you guys on the next live Artcasters. Bye.
All right. Later, guys.